Hi there. So I'm going to elaborate a little more on the video I did 2 videos ago on importing an object from Turbosquid into Unreal. In this case, the clothesline. And what I want to talk about is something I forgot to mention and look at last time, which is the textures and the texture sizes and the texture LODs, level of details. So just to recap on the system, here is a material unrelated to that mesh. It is for a medieval wall, one I made from photos. Anyway, and it uses a basic texture. Here it's got an alpha used for height map, but I'll just turn that off so you can see the texture. This is a 2K texture, 2048 by 2048, and that's about 5.4 kilobytes in memory. On disk, it's bigger. But how do we know these things? Well, find an asset and look at the size map. And here we see that the color texture, it claims to be 10.5 meg on the disk. That's not actually of interest to anything usually, because when you make a level, ultimately it gets packaged up before it's used, and that squishes things down, and the original size on disk is not that interesting. One thing that is interesting is the memory size, and here you see that the sort of color texture and the normal texture both come out to about 5.6 meg. Now that's fine, because in one of my levels I use this texture an awful lot and I want it to be a nice high resolution texture. It gives a nice, there's lots of bump mapping going on, and so it's a really relatively high quality material. I don't use it really much on this level, but I'd rather just keep it like that. But let's say I want to squish down the textures a bit, because if we look at this here, we can see that my texture pool is getting a bit big. There's a lot of textures being used everywhere, and that's partly, could be light maps as well as anything else. If you have a very large repeating element like elements of this wall, if that is a very large light map size, you can accidentally create a huge amount of light map that you need to have cached in memory. And that probably is true of this wall. I need to squish that down a bit. But if you want to sort of forensically analyze how things work, this is a slight digression, find the map. So if you want to say, where do I start squishing down all this stuff, just do a size map on the level and then wait possibly a while. I haven't done this recently. And again, if you go by the disk size, it's not going to help you because of LOD bias. Okay, so this is memory size, which is the most interesting thing relatively. And actually I'm just going to, because you can't see the bottom of my screen. So the biggest thing is this built data. That's basically light maps, and that's actually not so big given how big the level is. And you can see that the biggest offender is this clothesline that I put in. So in memory we've got massive textures. So, and the landscape layers are pretty much the next biggest thing, but that's okay because the landscape has to look good, and that's where it's worth putting in a bit of memory, a bit of effort to make it look better. Self stuff, properties of things, I think. And this tells me that some flowers, so I've got foliage which is big, and I'm going to have to work on squishing down the foliage. But there's a very easy way to do this. Normally, my cat's just jumped on the desk, so this may be interesting. So the easiest thing to do is to set a LOD bias of greater than 0. So if I set 1, what that does is it means that it resizes this in-game to 1K. If you do 2, it goes down to 512, and so on. And the quality obviously gets worse. You can zoom in somehow. There we go. So that's not going to look very good. So I propose to leave it at this resolution. And actually what it does, it just drops one of the MIP. So when a texture is loaded in, it creates multiple copies at half size, half size, half size, and so it roughly doubles the size of the texture in memory. When you do the sum of all those things, there's a mathematical formula for that. But anyway, it just and it displays and it packages to a smaller size. It still keeps the same size on disk, but if I was to resize that to LOD bias 1, hang on, let's start with 0. So if we go back to this texture just to remind ourselves, the size map in memory, oh my cat, go away, 5.6 meg for that. But if I go back and set a LOD bias of 1 on the color one, I don't even have to save it for this to take into account size map, memory size, and you can see that it's now shrunk that down by half. So each each LOD bias you set higher will scale it down by a factor of 2, pretty much, more or less. So the very easy way to get your textures to be smaller is to set the LOD bias of things to more than 0. Now, this clothesline has a lot of textures, they need to be resized. Let's find the trousers, they are the biggest offender, and here is the texture, and you can see it's a massive 51 meg on disk, I think that is. So we just set the LOD bias to something sensible. I mean, that's it's way bigger than it needs to be. 2 would be a sensible number, but you can see here it says no bitmaps, and you can't change that, and the LOD bias has no effect. The reason is this is not a power of 2 scale. So by power of 2 I mean 1024 by 1024, 2048 by 2048, or even other sizes like 1024 by 2048. That's fine, but to do bitmaps, for whatever reason, there's probably a good reason, the dimensions have to be powers of 2. Sorry, go away, cat. Ow! Ah, scratched me. Right, well that's all I deserved. So because that's not powers of 2, the bitmaps don't work. So I'm stuck with this massive, huge texture. It's any non-power of 2 textures are a little bit like icky. I mean, just no, try and avoid them. So we need to fix that. So here is my original model in Lightwave. Doesn't have to be Lightwave, this is just an example. And let's look at that in isolation. So there is, let's select trousers. There is the texture and the UVs overlaid. Lightwave has squished that out to 1 by 1, but if I go to Photoshop, here is, oh no, I don't want to do that. Do not want to do that. Here are the trousers, and if we look at the image size, just to confirm, it's odd number by odd number. Now, I want to convert this to a power of 2 texture. A couple of ways to do this, but I'm going to show you the way which is the most easy and systematic way to do this. Could still be a pain in the arse, generally speaking, but this is the way I found to do it. So first of all, set your largest dimension to be a power of 2. Doink. And then set your canvas size to be power of 2, which is going to leave a white or whatever colour gap. Now, for this to work, start it from the bottom so that you end up with the white space at the top. Save this out. Here's one I prepared earlier. Go to Lightwave. Now I'm going to go to my surface editor, select trousers. I'm going to change it from that to the other version, which is there, and for some reason that's not changing that yet. Oh, it does change. Okay, so I need to change this texture to that, and you can see that the mapping is wrong, so you see the white space on the trousers. So that's going to mess up the original model, but because of the way I've done it, if I select the entire surface, I'm now going to transform the UVs, and for the scale, okay, so my original dimensions were 3792 by 3450. So I'm just going to get the aspect ratio, 3792. I could actually do this in Lightwave, but I'm going to do it here. In fact, yeah, just do it, because Lightwave has the ability to do this. So 100 for percentage times times 3450 divided by 3792, if that's correct, gives you that scale, and you just scale it and that does it. So There's a bit of trickery, but the sum I did was basically 100% times the smaller dimension divided by the bigger dimension. I mean, you can put brackets around it if that makes you feel better, or it works out the same. That's basically the equation. So I've resized the texture by d2 over d1 or d1 over d2 for dimensions, and just plug that in. So I think I'll do one more, but that's now good to export. So if hang on, let me just finish doing this for all the things. I haven't done the t-shirt yet, so I'm going to select the entire surface. Wait, I'm going to change the texture first. So t-shirt, here's one I prepared earlier, though I think I've done it the wrong way. So I need to go to the t-shirt. Alright, so this one is a good example of one that's not a 1 by 1. This is a 2 by 1. So the nearest power of 2 dimension is not a square format, it's a rectangular format. So I'm going to go to image size. Now I'm using a bigger resolution than I need at this stage because you can always load bias down the texture. So I try and keep a very high resolution texture stored in Unreal, and then work with that. So I'm wasting a lot of disk space, but it gives me a lot of flexibility to maybe 5 years down the line make all my textures twice as good. That's very nearly a power of 2, but let's leave it for now. And I'm going to do my canvas size, start from the bottom and do a canvas size that equals a power of 2. So let's just put a tiny little bit at the top. I probably don't need to do any adjustments in Lightwave, but I'll do it for the sake of showing you. So that is my new, and I also don't forget to do it for your normals. So there's also normal textures. Same deal, 2048, canvas size 1024. Probably should do a blue background, but I don't care. I'm just going to go to the trousers normal just to make sure that is done also. 2048, canvas size starting from the bottom, 2048. So that is, I'm just going to, it just irritates me. So we want, oh good grief, is it 128, 128, 255? I think that's your basic, what do you call it, straight up normal, and just gonna do a fill. I never get that right. It just pains me to see a normal that's not looking like a normal. Alright, and the socks I did before. Oh, clicked the wrong thing. These I haven't done yet. I did this the wrong way, but I've already adjusted the UVs in the model, so I'm keeping this as it is. I'm just going to actually, yeah, I've done that one. Alright, so all I need to do in my model is change my t-shirt to be t-shirt 2K, and it was 1021. So I'm going to select the entire surface and do a transformation. I mean, you don't need to. You might just be able to see a bit of no, I mean you barely need to do anything, but I can, just for the sake of showing you what I'm doing. So transform 100 times the smaller dimension divided by the bigger dimension, but I think there needs to be a power of 2 there, so that's the scaling. So barely has any change whatsoever, but that's what I'm doing. So this is now a revised model, which I need to save in the right place. And going to go back to Unreal, get rid of this stuff. I'm going to come back to you, not going to come back to you. Okay, this is my, the UV map, the light map didn't work at all. It was throwing up errors of overlapping UVs. So Unreal completely failed to do a light map. So in fact, I'm just going to use the one I made, which is terrible. So that is the terrible. So I will go back and fix that, but for now that's what I'm doing. At least those ones don't overlap. And going to re-import the mesh, which is going to break the UV mapping. A little bit. The socks are broken. The trousers are not broken. Why is that actually not breaking it? Okay, the trousers are broken. You can see it's not mapped correctly. So I need to reload new textures, which I want to do anyway. I'm just going to change the names here. Because that makes life easier later on. I had previously renamed these inside Unreal, but better just to get this right here. This is not my usual naming scheme, but I don't want to take too long doing this. Right, shirt, trousers, socks. Okay, so this is going to be confusing. Has that overwritten? No, it hasn't overwritten. So I need to then find these materials. And this one. And this one. Why has that gone to a different place? And this is just a bit of tedious sort of find that, use that one. Easier with 2 screens, which I'm going to do. Just alright, let's do it that way. Dull. Right, 2K. See it slightly shift. And the normal. So that one's done. Find the trousers. This should have a good effect. So let's fix that. Get the trousers normal. And last one, the socks. Socks 2K. Ugh. Right, I need a bit more space to see what's going on there. Socks 2K and the socks 2K normal. Well, yeah, so if you don't use the right normal stuff, you get that kind of oddity. Just going to save that all. And la-di-da. Yeah. So it's just having a think, and there we go. So that is pretty much back where we started, except that now I can go to this horrible trouser texture. You see it's already smaller by a considerable margin. If I put a LOD bias of 1, it's still basically fine, and LOD bias of 2 is still basically fine. So if I try that, that now has a massive size of 171 kilobytes. But it's absolutely serviceable for this mesh in a community map, which doesn't have a very big download size. Well, about a gig plus, but you know. So similarly with the socks, 2.7 meg is still a lot. LOD bias, absolutely fine. Going to do the same for the normals. And so I've now managed to, well, let's have a look at the end, at the size map, and we'll see. Sometimes you want the normal to be higher resolution than the actual colours. But you're doing trade-offs. So I think that looks good enough for my purposes. And let's see what sort of size map we've got now. So there's our huge size on disk, and in memory, well, it all looks big. That is quite big. Why are the socks normal so big? Anyway, I think I've done something stupid somewhere, but why is that socks normal? So the socks, I think it's using an old version of, I don't know what's going on here. Something didn't update, but basically it's much smaller now, and that's more usable. And if I do that with a few other things, fix the other Turbosquid assets, I should be able to get the texture pool down a bit as well. So that's just a quick thing I was showing you. With the texture log bias and making things a power of 2 size is very good. You should never normally have it not a power of 2 unless you're being lazy, but you will suffer in terms of memory usage. Okay, bye.